Hi everybody, back to Monday's cookery. I thought what would be really useful would be to have a recipe to use up leftover bread. At the moment, when we're only going to the shops once a week, it's really important we don't waste anything at all. And so when you've got bread that's really stale and it's no use for a sandwich anymore, or it isn't even great for toast, then it'd be really great if we could make a kind of nice dinner or a lunch or a breakfast out of it. There's obviously the things that you can do. You can make it into breadcrumbs if you've got some way of whizzing it up, or you can grate it into a plastic bag, you can freeze it. You can then use it to sprinkle on top of macaroni and cheese and put under the grill, or you can add it to meatballs, to mince when you're making meatballs, and that will make your meat go further, which will then save you a bit of money. Or you can make it into croutons, so you can cut it into squares, drizzle it with olive oil and pop it into an oven at 180 and just keep an eye on it, and you can then use that for soup or for salads. But we're going to use it to make the basis of a brunch recipe. It's an American brunch recipe, but you could equally have it for dinner if you want. So what I've got is I've got some stale leftover bread. Obviously the bread needs to be stale for this because it's going to soak up eggs and milk, and you don't want it to just go into a mush. You want it to stay so that you can taste the bread in it. I fried up here in a pan. I've fried up for 5 minutes. I've got some onions, some mushrooms and some bacon, and I put a little bit of thyme from the garden in it. And you can use whatever you want there. You could use some ham, you can use some sweet corn, you can use some spring onions, you can use a leek. So whatever you've got lying around in the fridge, just use it up. This is a real use up recipe. I've then got eggs, I've got full fat milk. If you had a bit of cream or creme fraiche, that would make this a much more luxurious dish. I've got some cheese to grate on top, and I've got some tomatoes. You don't need tomatoes at all. I just had some, so I thought I'm going to put them on top. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my bread up into some chunks. Now if your bread is so stale that you can't even get a knife through it, the best thing to do is to run it under a cold tap for a few seconds, not long, and then just leave it to sit. Because bread generally, before it goes mouldy, it will go stale, and by stale it dries out. So you're just rehydrating it by using some water to get it sort of bouncy again. And you can then, if you have bread that you want to toast, you can cut slices off, and even after you've wet it, you can then toast it under the grill, and you can get a new lease of life out of your bread. So I'm just going to cut these into chunks, and then I'm going to start layering it up in my pan. This really is the easiest recipe, and whilst I'm doing a savoury one here at the end, or when it's in the oven, I will tell you how you can make it a sweet recipe as well. So it really is one of the most flexible recipes you can do. You can see from how hard I'm having to press that this is bread that is beyond its best. It was a loaf of sourdough, so things that would be really good in this are leftover French bread, leftover croissant. Sometimes you'll eat one and then you'll find one at the bottom of the bag. And we can scale it up and down, so we can scale it up for more people and you can scale it down for less people. So if you're on your own, this is a recipe you can do for one. So I think that's the last bit of my bread chopped up into little pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got a piece of butter here. I'm just going to liberally grease the inside of my dish. This will hopefully stop it sticking too much, but it also adds a really nice taste. So I've got some really lovely big bits of butter there on the dish. I'm going to put a little bit of my mixture in the bottom, spread it out, and then I'm going to put some of my bread on top. I might have a bit much bread here, and I might end up using some of it to make some croutons, but we'll see how we get on. So I'm just sprinkling a bit more of my mixture on top. And remember, this is up to you entirely what you add to your mixture. So I've got there mushrooms, a bit of 2 rashers of bacon I had left, and a red onion. It was only 2 or 3 mushrooms, so no, I've got enough room for all of this. So I have that in, and I'm just giving it a good shove down so it fills my dish. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to whip up my eggs. Anybody who's made eggy bread before will know this recipe. So I'm going to use 3 eggs and 200 mils of milk. It is not an exact science, this. If you have some cream or some creme fraiche, then you can add that and you'll end up with a much more sort of luxurious and, you know, richer thing. So I've got 200 mils of whole milk here. I much prefer using whole milk because the fat in the milk carries your fat soluble vitamins that you need. So don't go for your red skimmed milk unless you've been advised to do that by the doctor. Go for your green top or your blue top milk. Nice big pinch of salt. I'm going to put a couple of pinches in here so that it's really tasty. And I'm just whipping it up, making a big mess. So whipping it up in my bowl until the yolks are broken down. And so if you wanted to do this for one person, you could use just 1 egg and then you just scale down your milk. But don't worry too much about exact amounts. So I had 3 eggs and 200 mils. So if you did 1 egg and say 70 mils of milk, I think that would be a really nice dish for one. So I've whipped it up, I've got salt and pepper in there, and I'm going to pour it over the bread. And you want it to soak into the bread. So I'm just going to use my hands to scrape the bowl out, and then I'm going to push it down. Can you see I'm pushing it down into the egg mixture? And I'm going to just leave that to sit now for 10 minutes to absorb some of the egg and milk mixture while I turn my oven on to 180 degrees. Okay, so this has been soaking now for 10 minutes. If it soaks everything up completely and you've got you can't see any mixture underneath, then just add a splash more milk. I'm sorry that this recipe hasn't got better amounts, but I think if you have too many amounts in a leftovers recipe, then you end up going to the shops to buy things to use up leftovers, whereas really what I want you to do is just use what you've got in the house. So I've quartered my tomatoes and I'm just tucking them in and around the top of this, and that'll add a bit more sort of juiciness to it and a bit more flavour and stops it being too rich. And then I've got a lump of cheese here. Any cheese will do. I've got some cheddar because that's what I've got in the house, but you could do a mixture of cheddar, parmesan. If you've got some mozzarella left from doing your pizza last week, you could add that on. So I'm just doing a big mound of cheese. Again, amounts really don't matter here. The cheesier it is, the crispier and more golden it will go on top, but it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to spread my cheese out a little bit, and I'm just going to make sure it's not on the side so it doesn't burn. And I will go and put this in the oven for, I'm going to start off with 20 minutes on 180, and I'm going to have a check on it, and I'll just have a look to see whether it's done, but it might be half an hour. So this is going in the oven at 180 to start with 20 minutes, and I think this could serve 4 people with a side salad for dinner or for breakfast. Okay, so this has now been in the oven for about 35 minutes at 180, and you can see the cheese is all melted at the top. It's still a little bit gooey underneath, which is what we want, and that will be just delicious. We're going to have that probably tomorrow for breakfast, so I will leave it in its tin. I can put some tin foil over the top to reheat it for tomorrow, but I could have equally left it soaking in the milk overnight and baked it tomorrow, but I wanted you to see how it looked done. Now, if you want to do a sweet version of this, you don't need to put in, obviously, onions, which wouldn't be very nice, but you can just do the bread, make up your milk and egg mixture, add in a couple of tablespoons of caster sugar, maybe a bit of vanilla if you've got it, whip that up, and you can put your bread cubes into your pan with some berries. You can use frozen berries like blueberries or raspberries. Pour your mixture over the top and then bake that in the oven, and then you've got a sweet version as well. So I really hope you find this useful and that you have some stale bread that you can use up to make a really lovely dinner out of something that you probably used to feed the ducks with. I hope you enjoy baking this.